You know what? You're a sinner, and there's nothing you can do about it. That is pretty much what my son learns when he goes to his Christian school. And I think a lot of people believe that we're all born sinners and we must live our lives correcting that sin. Here's the thing is they're getting that concept from a book called the Bible. The Bible was rewritten from the Hebrew language. Well, actually, the Bible was created by King James from numerous Hebrew stories. And I want to put into perspective for you a couple things. Number one, King James was a king. And by giving his constituency religious concepts, he was providing them with a level of control higher than himself. And so the way that the word sin is perceived in the King James Version may seem more along the lines of, if you sin, you've committed an offense against a divine doctrine. And that's just the way of the thinking back then. But even then, I don't think the word sin to King James meant the way that we've taken it today. I think it's taken a lot more twisting by religious beliefs to create this word that means that you've created an offense against God, and that you yourself are an offense against God. I mean, that's the silly concept of the word sin as modern day defines it. If you actually look into the Hebrew language, there are words in the Bible that the Hebrews actually have multiple words for. Sin is one of them. Also, this is an interesting one. The serpent is one of them. See, a serpent in the Hebrew language means a whisper, or to tell a lie. Sin is very interesting because sin does not mean necessarily that it is something that you have done. The most common Hebrew word for sin, the exact translation means to miss the mark. But it could also mean to trespass, it could also mean to transgress, it could also mean to just simply be an error. In fact, I would say that if you were to take all of the Hebrew words for sin and translate them into modern day English, you would probably get the word error. So is error a concept of making an offense against God? No. What it means, what they're saying is, if you don't think rightly, then you've missed the mark. And if you correct your thought, then you will get back on track. It's kind of interesting when you read these books and you read the Bible and you study translations and you actually kind of go back to understanding the way that people spoke back then, which was very theatrical. What you end up with is that sin is just meaning that you've made a mistake. It doesn't mean that you've made an offense against some divine decree and you're going to hell. It just means that you're on the wrong track. Fix it. A Bible verse that my son was having to learn last week for school said that if you sin, basically truth is not with you. But if you confess and return to righteousness, you will be forgiven. What does that verse actually mean? It means that if you're thinking wrong, then you're not thinking truthfully. Righteousness, this is another interesting word from the Bible, but righteousness means to be thinking rightly. I think it's often taken as another one of those divine doctrines of how you should be acting. It just means to be thinking rightly. And if you're thinking rightly and you are confessing, which would actually mean in this case that you are recognizing for yourself your wrongful thoughts, they say then you will be forgiven. Well, if you're not thinking rightly and you're not taking corrective action yourself, if God is an omnipotent power, don't you think that he would help correct your thought? So could that be the punishment? The correction is what so many people are seeing as punishment, but that's just a correction. It's to help you be corrected because you're not thinking rightly. But if you correct it on your own, then there's nothing to correct. God's not going to continue to correct you for it, not punish you. I haven't looked into the word punishment, but I am sure that I will find all sorts of different meanings for it that we have translated into the modern day language as this horrible thing called punishment. But again, like, this was about sin, and I wanted to do this video on sin because it's an incredible word. It's very powerful. It's something that can really knock people down to go to church and constantly think that they are a sinner. It's not true. You're not a sinner. It means nothing more than an error. It's not something that you have committed or something that you are stuck with. It just means that if you are not thinking righteously, if you are not thinking along the lines of truth, then you are thinking along the lines of an error. You've missed the mark. And that's what the word sin means. So are we all sinners? I would say that we all miss the mark a lot. And so therefore, yes. But does that mean that we have to correct ourselves or we're going to hell? No. The other thing about this is, people believe that Jesus died for our sins. I would say that Jesus proved our sins to be incorrect. He didn't actually die anyway. He resurrected. That's kind of what Easter's all about. In that passing, in that theatrical moment, he proved to us that everything we knew about life and death was incorrect. If you think about the way people present this now, that Jesus died for our sins, you think of this this horrible thing, this horrible burden that a man took upon himself, when it wasn't a burden that he was taking upon himself. It was an educative course on what life is, and he taught us that. That's probably one of his most valuable lessons to all of us. That our way of thinking of materiality and its importance was an error. Next time that you're feeling down because somebody tells you that we're all sinners and you're just going to always be a sinner, I want you to remember that the word sin just means an error. It means that you've missed the mark. Are you missing the mark, or are you constantly confessing to yourself that you might not be thinking correctly? And then correcting your thought, elevating your thought. That is all any of this word means, is to elevate our thoughts. If you were to open the Bible today, start reading through it and start replacing the word sin with error. Or I guess, when you read it, because it does come from the Hebrew language and there were multiple words that represented a similar meaning, you have to actually kind of read the Bible and get the context of what you're reading, and then replace the word with what would be the most appropriate. Error, miss the mark, trespass, transgress, make a mistake, whatever it is. If you read the context of the quote or the section of the Bible that you're reading, you could find numerous words that represent the word sin from the Hebrew language that could be replaced with that and help you understand it more in a modern language, more of a way that we would understand it today. Because we have twisted this word sin that was created so many years ago to basically collectively merge all those different meanings from the Hebrew language into the Bible, and we've twisted it to the point of turning it into this holy offense against God, and it's not at all. It's just letting us know, in the stories when somebody made a mistake and how they were able to correct that mistake and move forward. So go about your day knowing that you are not a sinner. You have not completed some big offense against God. You are not going to go to hell. Simply said and simply translated from the Hebrew language, if you have committed a sin, you have just simply missed the mark. You have misunderstood something, you aren't thinking correctly, you've made an error. It's easily fixed. That's what the Bible's all about, is fixing those errors, fixing those mistakes in our thoughts. And it really has more to do with the word itself in Hebrew has more to do with misunderstanding, making a mistake from misunderstanding, than it does to actually commit some sort of horrible offense. I constantly have to explain this to my kids because One of them does attend a private Christian school, and that is something that they will drill into the kids, that they're sinners, they're sinners, and we're all sinners, and we all have to be forgiven. And that is very incorrect. It is a highly misinterpretation of the Bible and the stories in the Bible. And it's something that we need to make sure that we're not teaching our kids incorrectly.